Golfbet Roundtable coming at you for the 3M Open. Should you be avoiding the stars this week? All of them coming back from the Open, and they all have the shortest odds. We have some exclusive insight on all that from Steve Hennessey, the managing editor of Golf Digest, who just said, "Call me whatever you want." What's that about, Steve?
I've been called a lot of things in my life. Deputy managing editor is one of them. But I just appreciate you guys having me on. So you could definitely refer to me however you want going forward.
Fair enough.
We are happy to have you on, Steve. We have picks to get to, best bets, long shots, winners, but we're going to start with those favorites in a week where obviously it's on everybody's mind. You've got the massive, call it a hangover, traveling back from the UK for all of these star players with the shortest odds, Steve, came from the Open. Do you view that as a concern this week?
I think it depends, guys, how much in the mix they were. We've seen in the past when Tony Finau won 2 years ago, he was coming back from the Open and that didn't affect him. He also wasn't really in the mix that week. Mm-hmm. And then last year, Lee Hodges was also coming back from the Open and won it. So, it definitely can be done. I do think someone like Billy Horschel, who emotionally, that had to be draining, contending, playing in the final group, that has to take a toll this week. I'm sure it's a bit of an ease up for him. And, he's firmly in the FedEx Cup, all that. So he doesn't have as much to play for. But, some of the other guys at the top, Sahith and Tony both missed the cut, as did Akshay. So, I don't know that it's as much of a negative for those guys as it would be for Billy Horschel.
Yeah, on my side, I completely agree. I think Billy Horschel, your colleague said it the best, Andy. He said he's an easy fade this week because Billy Horschel came down to the wire, had a career opportunity to get the win. I think he's absolutely an easy fade. But for the other guys, a lot of people are throwing out the Open for consideration this week because it's such a different course, because it's such a hard course. So those Justin Roses and Billy Horschels, those are different than the guys who barely made the cut or didn't make the cut, in my opinion.
Well, and here's the thing. I actually did the stat. So 17 players have finished top 5 or ties at the 3M Open the last 3 years. Okay, so 17 players. 13 of those 17 either missed the cut at the Open or they didn't play in the Open. And I think Louis Oosthuizen, who, Steve, you probably agree, is a misnomer. Let me throw him out the window. He does not count for anything with how ridiculous his top 5s have been in majors. He doesn't count. The highest place any Open guy had done was Finau 2 years ago, was T28 at the Open Championship. So clearly, I agree. I don't think being in contention, those numbers say it all. Being in contention was not a good thing last week. Now, Steve, I'm curious about this. Do you look at this differently as you would say when it was the U.S. Open, when guys were playing 8 out of 9 weeks, they were playing 3 straight signature events, and it was crazy? Is that different from this?
Yeah, that's interesting because, this is part of the part of the season where, you're sort of letting your foot off the gas in all likelihood, especially if you're in good standing in the FedEx Cup. Mm-hmm. You're in good shape. You're not necessarily all systems go. You're turning up for the playoffs. I think the guys, who we'll talk about in a little, I'm sure, who are on the bubble, this is everything you got this week. But yeah, I think last week was just such a different test. There's not going to be a lot of long irons off the tee at TPC Twin Cities. It's going to be driver all day. So, I think it's a different sort of week. And, I think it's easy enough to fade some of the guys at the top. Especially Billy Horschel, if you could find him in some matchups that you like. I think that's a no-brainer.
He's got Hoagie, right, Matt? He's against Hoagie, and he's minus money on Hoagie, I believe.
He's minus money on Hoagie all over that matchup. But I think what you mentioned is a big point with the FedEx Cup playoffs. This is the time where everyone's gearing up to get positioning. I think top 70 obviously is important to get in, but look at those guys outside the top 30. Mm-hmm. They're the Tour champ guys. Those are the guys who really want to get their points now and not have to rely on the Wyndham or the FedEx St. Jude once the playoff starts. So those guys outside top 30, I think, also are a little bit more motivated instead of the Tony Finaus or the Akshays, who are a little bit safer in the FedEx Cup standings.
Yeah, we're bringing this up because there's only a couple of weeks left, guys. You've got Wyndham. Olympics next week doesn't count, obviously. You're not in the top 70, and you have no chance at the signature events next year unless you qualify at the very end or next year. That is a lot of money, Steve. So what's your thought on, because golf is very different when it's play for your life, right? I mean, guys can only play so well and they might psych themselves out. Do you kind of agree with the notion if you're on the outside of the top 70, it's a good idea to pick somebody, because the opposite says, well, they're going to psych themselves out and not play very well?
Yeah, I think it depends on the player. I think a little extra motivation will help a lot of these guys. You know, if you look at this list, people like Keith Mitchell a lot this week. I think he's 30-1 or so. This is a good setup for him. Harry Hall, obviously coming off the win in Kentucky, is another good one. So, you know, I do think it's all about how guys are motivated. I give a little bit of an edge to the guys who have been in this position before too, because if you haven't been in this spot, that's a different sort of feeling playing for your job. You know, it's different when you're trying to close out a win. You know, you sort of know second, third place is going to put you in a pretty good spot. But, you know, if you're playing for a position, you know, in these elevated events next year, that's a different sort of pressure. And it'll be interesting to see how some of these guys handle it.
So let's go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was just going to say, be cautious. Take it all with a grain of salt, because, yes, you want these guys who are motivated to get into top 70, but don't get me wrong. These other guys who are playing, they're playing for a reason.
Right.
You know, Finau's not going to lay over. Akshay's not going to lay over. So don't purposely dig so deep to find someone who's motivated. But if you like someone who's so deep and is motivated, it's just an added bonus.
Yeah, good point.
Well, Steven, your best bet this week doesn't need any motivation. He's already won this week. What do you got here? This year, I should say.
Yeah, Austin Eckroat, I think, is a great fit for TPC Twin Cities. When Michael Thompson won here a few years ago, he likened this course to PGA National, and that's where Austin Eckroat has won the Cognizant. So, you know, I think he's really making a leap in terms of talent. You know, and he's pretty comfortable in his positioning right now as well. Coming over from the Open, you know, we saw him contend at Pinehurst. He's just really accurate off the tee, and he's long too, guys, and really good on approach play. So I think this week suits Austin Eckroat really well. I expect big things, and I think a top 20 at these odds, plus 210, that's a home run.
Matt, your best bet, I got to give you kudos, because when you were going to submit this, I was planning on just putting up your top 10. Remind me who it was again?
My top 10?
Yeah, who was it again?
It's Jake Knapp.
Okay, but that's not what we're showing on the screen here. I
No.
love this bet.
No, you got to dig deep for this one. So this one is really because the 72nd hole, the 18th hole of the event is exciting. It's a par 5. I want someone to birdie this. So let's look at the last 4 years. 2 people have birdied it over the last 4 years. It was it's really a hole that you can absolutely get. Some people, Finau, who didn't birdie it over the last 4 years, he only didn't birdie it because he had a big lead. So also the person who hasn't birdied it, the third person, Cameron Champ, he basically birdied it in my mind. He pulled it left off the tee. He then laid up, but then he went close from 127 yards out and tapped it in for par. So you're looking at this to be a tight event. I think you go for birdie at plus 120, sprinkle a little eagle at plus 2200, maybe extra zero, that extra 0.2 unit that you'll get from winning the birdie, sprinkle that on eagle, because I think fireworks are going to happen on this hole.
That's amazing. What do you think of that, Steve?
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's a memorable finishing hole. We've seen guys like Matthew Wolff, you know, cap it off in big fashion. So Matt's dug deep for this one, and I'm going to hop aboard for sure.
Well, I'm really glad that you earlier brought up Keith Mitchell, because I had to make him my top 10, and part of me didn't want to, because let's face it, Mitchell really hasn't played that great a golf the last handful of weeks. In fact, just pulling up his last 5 events, he's missed the cut 3 times. But he did have a T18 and a T10. And Keith Mitchell, if you notice his stats this year, he has been awesome everywhere but the green. Now, obviously, in a birdie fest, when the winning score is going to be 20, 25 under par, that's a cause for concern. But I'm taking it as Keith Mitchell's tee to green game is going to be great. All he needs is a hot putter. Now, Steve, I want to get your thought on this. Would you rather take players who need to get a hot putter and the rest of their game is good, or the other way around where they're already a great putter but the rest of their game is kind of iffy?
You know, I always lean on ball striking. Putting is just so
good answer.
Cyclical. So, Keith Mitchell has made quite a leap in the approach category, as you guys have seen all year, and the finishes haven't been there. But he's got 2 top 5 finishes the last 2 starts he's had at TPC Twin Cities. So really like the call. We just got to hope for, just a positive putting week, and he should be right there with how good his ball striking is.
He would not be seen as a long shot. Who is your long shot pick this week?
Yeah, so a guy who, again, is on the outside looking in, but, we saw him in that playoff in Kentucky a few weeks ago, Pearson Coody. He's been working with Chris Como a lot recently, and, that's paying dividends with his swing. We saw him right there with a great chance to win, and that was another driver-heavy birdie fest in Kentucky. So, and he's a good putter, so we know it could get hot. That's going to be pretty big at TPC Twin Cities, and like I mentioned, Matt Wolff took this event down when he was a rookie, so I think Pearson Coody could do the same thing this week.
I think we forget that, Matt Wolff was extremely young when he won that year. And Coody is just a testament to how good some of these younger players are. And Matt, your guy's no exception.
Let's keep running it back with the young stars. Like, this is the event where young stars have come out in the past, so why not take Thor? He's that kind of guy who's been playing okay. He played really good at the John Deere, came T2, but he's someone who I just think if he's driving well and he's able to get the birdies that he should get, he's that young guy who can really pop up. I like Coody too, so you should definitely sprinkle on some of these young stars because this is kind of the week where we really get to see them expand and really see them take that next step like Wolff did in the past.
So the funny thing about Thor Bjornsson, Steve, is doing these numbers, his last 5 events, there is only 5 events as a tour player. And look at these events. I mean, it's crazy.
I know. I mean, and to Matt's credit, 60-1 on Thor Bjornsson. You have Luke Clanton, who's he's making 4th start, but his odds are like 25-1. To me, I'd rather take the 60-1 odds when for all we know, Thor Bjornsson is as good or maybe even better than Luke Clanton. So I like the pick for sure.
My long shot is a player who's been around, feels like, for a long time. Doug Gim's the kind of guy who I keep wanting to put in the back pocket and think he'll do something eventually because, let's face it, he really hasn't done a whole lot. But he's just the kind of player who, a lot like Keith Mitchell, he is great on the approach. He just can't make a big putt to save his life. And so that's his issue. Again, all I need is a big, good putting week, and Doug Gim at 66-1 is something that I like. 2 missed cuts recently, which is fine. What I found really recently, Steve, doing the key stats video yesterday, was guys who have done well at TPC Twin Cities, they haven't necessarily been playing that great recently a lot. There were a lot of winners and top 5 guys who had missed the cut a lot, but they had shown a little bit of form in the last 5 weeks. How do you see that this week when you were looking at your guys?
Yeah, I think you just want a guy who could get hot, and especially betting outrights, which is mostly what we're talking about. It doesn't matter if your guy finishes second or misses the cut. So Gim was someone that I bet a lot early in the season, and like you said, he hasn't done much recently, but pretty good vibes for him at the 3M. He's got 3 top 30s his last 4 starts, so he's been a firm member of Team No Putt for a pretty long time, but kind of like Keith Mitchell, you're just banking on him, being a little positive on the greens, and he'll have success here.
Gim and Mitchell, those 2 guys, you'll know how good their week is like the first round.
Oh yeah. First 9 holes.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be like, all right, they're gonna have a good week. If it's not, I don't know if they're bouncing back.
If they're not 4 under through 9, is what you're saying. If they're even par,
essentially.
God forbid if they're 1 under, eject, like Ben Everill would say, right? All right, how about your winner, Steve? I love this pick, by the way.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of folks in the industry are going to be on Eric Van Rooyen. I think I've bet him the last 3 years, given the Minnesota ties with EVR. Everyone is kind of jumping on the fact that he's a University of Minnesota product. What I really like, I'm a journalist, I'm looking into the stories, I'm a sucker for these things, but this is the first time he's back at this event since the passing of his buddy who was on the University of Minnesota golf team with him, and we know after his win in Mexico how much that meant to him. So I think there's a little extra motivation for EVR this week. He had a great week in Scotland, narrowly missed out on one of those last open bids, and if you look at his success in Birdie Fest, this year. He's played great, going all the way back to Vedanta early in the year. So give me EVR at 40-1. I know it's chalky, but I would hate to miss out on the community win with EVR.
Yeah, I actually heard a lot of people, even Pat Mayo's podcast, talk about EVR a lot. I think they actually said too he's the same odds this year as he was last time he played. So that Minnesota ties, I mean, there's got to be something there, right?
The reason why I like that pick is because I have EVR only needing to beat one guy, Patrick Rogers, and I get my pick right. So I got him against one guy. You got him against the field. I like my odds a little bit better than yours. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too. But, if it hits, then we're all going to be happy.
There you go.
Absolutely. Maddie, what about you?
Tom Hoge, absolutely love him this week. He's one of the best approach players on tour. He's second behind Scotty Scheffler. Course history is good too. T20 last year, T4 the year before. He made the cut at the Open. So that's honestly pretty good for Tom Hoge. You make the cut at the Open. We all saw how hard it was. And his last Birdie Fest event was the Travelers, where he came T3. I think the other big thing this week is the Florida comparisons of TPC Twin Cities to PGA National and other Florida courses with how much water's there. He had a really good stretch in February in the beginning of the season. He had 3 T20s heading into the Florida stretch. Then he played pretty good at the Cognizant PGA National T28, then T12 at API, T54 at the Players. So I think he's a guy, and our colleague Kevin Price will say the same thing. If he gets hot right now, make a President's Cup run. Get a win here. Get a win maybe at Wyndham or the playoffs, and we could be seeing Tom Hoge in the President's Cup. It's a miracle situation if it happened, but I like him a lot this week.
I don't want him on the Ryder Cup. I'm sorry. President's Cup's fine. I don't want him on the Ryder Cup.
President's
Unless
Cup.
he changes our mind in the next year, right?
Yeah, we'll stick with President's Cup if he gets 1 or 2 more wins.
Okay, guys. We talked so much about these star players and why not to pick them. I'm picking one of them, but it's the guy who still fits the mold and the narrative of what I was saying, because Sahith Theegala did not play well at the Open. He missed the cut, 13 of 17, I mentioned. Missed the cut or did not play, 3 Open top 5. I am not going to let one bad historic wind week ruin what I think is still a really good player right now. I am throwing out the Open completely because of those variables of the wind. He was 4th at the Scottish Open the week before that, which, go figure, a mix between links and American, right? The wind was not nearly what it was. It may as well have played like an American-style course that week. I am focusing on Theegala's other achievements. The fact that he has been great, all aspects of his game. And this is a kid. I call him a kid, Steve. This is a kid who, he's going to win again soon. He's going to win, and he's going to do it. He's way too good, and we can't forget about the fact that Sahith Theegala is that good, and he is going to win, I hope sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think him at a Birdie Fest type of course is great, and he's been so good on the PGA Tour all season long. You're ignoring the course history here a bit, but, the talent and the upside with Sahith is tough to ignore. And 22-1, we've seen him at shorter odds this year, so definitely don't hate it. You can make a lot worse bets this week, I think.
Theegala's the guy that I feel like isn't getting as much hype, even though he's up on the odds boards. So he's totally that guy that we could all be at the end of the week being like, why did we ignore Theegala? And you're on the other side of that, Chris, so I think that's good for you. But actually, I'm going to go the opposite with Steve. I don't like him in a Birdie Fest. He was T48 at the Travelers. That's not good in my mind in a signature event. I think he's actually better on hard courses, i.e. the Scottish Open. So I'm still hesitant on Theegala. He needs to show me more.
See, I know Theegala and Batia are your boys, Matt.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you were going to pick one of them. I know you're fading Batia hard. You might be fading Theegala hard. I just got a feeling on that. Hey, well, Steve. Yeah, go ahead before you go.
I was just going to say, the thing with Akshay is, first of all, I had him at the Rocket. Absolutely horrible to see what happened. But the thing with Akshay is he had an unbelievable June. You look back at his June, he was like the hottest player on tour in June, but he's also someone who can get really cold. When's the last time he got really cold? The Florida swing. He had 3 straight missed cuts, WM Phoenix Open, and then the PGA National and the Players. So that's 3 straight mixed cuts. He can get really cold, and it's those Florida courses that I mentioned earlier. I wouldn't touch Akshay this week.
Yeah, I think it's, the accuracy off the tee could be a struggle for Sahith. So, it'll be interesting to see, if he could if he could just hit that sort of bunt driver that we saw him deploying, around May or June, that led to that hot stretch, that'll give him positions to score, but we'll see if he makes that adjustment.
Hey, Steve, this was fun. He's Steve Hennessey, Deputy Managing Editor for Golf Digest. Tell everybody what you're up to these days at the Digest.
Yeah, appreciate it. The Loop podcast is every week on the Golf Digest podcast network with my guys Christopher Powers and Alex Myers. So we got some good guests on there. So go check that out. And we're coming up with our best courses in every country rankings, which is exciting. So came out with our World 100 a few weeks ago, and rolled out Scotland last week, and you'll see a couple other countries, France going into the Olympics. So it's an exciting stretch for the season and exciting stuff content wise, as you guys know. So thanks so much for having me.
Nice. Look forward to it.